Alrighty, welcome back everybody. Rusty here with the Rugby review. Pardon me for the little delay with this episode. I'd gotten sick and lost my voice and took a little while to get feeling good again. So anyway, this episode is going to be going over the fourth and final round of the Investec Champions Cup. So with that being said, let's dive into Pool 1, Round 4 results. So we have Game 1 was between Toulouse and Sale. We have Toulouse 77, Sale 7. Game 2 was between Hollywood Bet Sharks and Claremont. We have Hollywood Bet Sharks 50, Claremont 12. And the third and final game for Pool 1 was between Glasgow and Saracens. We have Glasgow 28, Saracens 3. And the game we're going to deep dive on is the Glasgow Saracens game. So let's take a closer look at that. Again, we have Glasgow 28, Saracens 3. Saracens in the red ink, Glasgow will be in the black ink. And as we zoom in here, what we'll kind of see is Saracens have offensive stats in their favor, and Glasgow had to rely on a very strong defensive effort for this game. But with that being said, when Glasgow did have ball in hand, they were way more effective and way more efficient with it than Saracens was. So again, possession territory, more so territory is heavily skewed towards Saracens. Saracens had a little bit of a favor in possession. Again, Saracens were the team who had the ball in hand a little bit more, were playing offense a little bit more, while Glasgow had a big defensive effort to put in. You can see that with tackles made. Glasgow is making 202 tackles to the 128 for Saracens. Now, if you remember, I said when Glasgow was on offense, they were much more efficient, much more effective with ball in hand than the Saracens were. And you can really see that with post-contact meters, because Glasgow had 246 post-contact meters to the 161 for the Saracens. So despite the possession and territory advantage for Saracens, it didn't matter too much. The defensive effort for Glasgow was strong enough to take away that advantage. Plus, with ball in hand, Glasgow is just, again, more effective, more efficient with the ball. And as we slide down the stat sheet here, again, strong defensive effort by Glasgow this game. You can definitely see that with 13 turnovers won at the breakdown. It's a huge number for them to be turning the ball over on the Saracens. Now, from what I can remember, this game was played in absolutely horrendous weather conditions. It was very, very rainy this week. That's why we're seeing both teams have a lot of handling errors and turnovers lost. However, the one thing that definitely did hurt Saracens this week was being very ill-disciplined, as you can see with penalties conceded. They conceded twice the number of penalties as Glasgow did. If you've been watching the URC, you know how well Glasgow has been playing this entire season. So when you have that many penalties being given away to a team like Glasgow, they will absolutely take the advantage 10 times out of 10. And they absolutely did this week, or for this game. In addition, just to kind of emphasize the efficiency of Glasgow this week, defenders beaten. They have more defenders beaten, which translated into more clean breaks. Again, even though they had less possession, less territory, they were beating more defenders, having more clean breaks, having more scoring opportunities than the Saracens did for this particular game. So very, very, very strong win for Glasgow this week, which definitely helps solidify a home round of 16 game. So with that being said, let's look at the standings for Pool 1. And again, this is final. These standings will not change completely finalized. So as we see with the Pool 1 standings, Glasgow and Toulouse, are the top 2 seeds, and both have secured home games for the round of 16. Sale Sharks Saracens finish in Pool 1 ranked 3-4. And they have solidified away games for the round of 16. Hollywood Bet Sharks just misses out on moving forward in the Champions Cup, and they drop down to the Challenge Cup. And then Claremont, they went 0-4, are completely eliminated from all Champions Cup games and Challenge Cup games. So that's Pool 1 right there. Let's move into Pool 2. So this is Pool 2, Round 4 results. Game 1 was between Bath and Edinburgh. Bath, very, very dominant game. Bath 63, Edinburgh 10. Game 2, super close competition here between Castres and Munster. We have Cast 31, Munster 29. Third and final game was between Gloucester and Toulon. Very strong victory for Toulon this week, with Toulon scoring 31 and Gloucester scoring 14. Now the game we're going to look at is Game 2, is the Cast Munster game. This was a very, very, very important game here, because with this loss by Munster, it dropped Munster out of the Champions Cup down to the Challenge Cup round of 16. So it's a huge, huge outcome here. And I think Munster kind of left a little bit on the table here. As we'll see through these stats, Munster seems to have more of an advantage on offensive stats. Cast is the team playing defense a little bit more, and then Munster didn't necessarily convert their opportunities when they had them. So let's zoom in on the top half here. Possession favors Munster in the black ink. Territory favors Cast in the blue ink. So Munster is holding on to the ball more. However, they are playing in their own half of the field more. So it's kind of evens out there a little bit. If we look at tackles made, I think this helps emphasize the point of Cast as the team playing defense a little bit more during the course of this game, whereas Munster was just the team with more offensive opportunity. So we have Munster making 108 tackles and Cast having to make 156. Now, tackles missed will kind of come in play a little bit later, especially when we go through defenders beaten, but 29 tackles missed for Munster, which is a lot compared to how many tackles they had to make. Cast also missed a large number of tackles. However, on a percentage basis, the tackle success rate was greater for Cast than Munster, which, doesn't look like much, but when it's a 2-point margin of victory, you start having a lower tackle success rate with a smaller number of tackles. It could just give Cast that little extra opportunity to have that 2-point margin of victory. Now, if we go down to post-contact meters, I think this helps showcase the point of Munster was the team with ball in hand playing offense a little bit more, and Cast had to rely a little bit more on defense. So post-contact meters was 352 for Munster to 267 for Cast. Again, Munster, the team playing offense a little bit more than Cast is, and you can kind of see that with the stats up here. Now let's slide down to the bottom half, and we'll see what hurt Munster and how they didn't really convert their offensive opportunities. So turnovers lost. Let's zoom in right there. Turnovers lost. 16 turnovers lost for Munster. Now, Cast had a lot themselves. Cast had 12 turnovers lost as well. However, that extra 4 turnovers lost for Munster, those 4 extra handling errors and a 2-point margin of victory could be kind of all it really takes. You you have those little extra, 4 extra opportunities for Cast now to clear their defensive line if Munster is making those handling errors inside Cast's 22. Anyway, let's look down at defenders beaten plus clean breaks. I think this will help emphasize the point of Munster was not necessarily the most efficient team offensively this game, because we're seeing, well, they were efficient with their clean breaks and offensive opportunities. I just feel like they could have converted them into even more points instead of the outcome that it was. So defenders beaten. Munster has a lot of defenders beaten with 37 defenders beaten, which translated to 15 clean breaks for Munster. Now, if we look at Cast also has a large number of defenders beaten with 29, but that only translated to 7 clean breaks. So Munster's getting their opportunity in there. It's just those turnovers lost is what really killed them at the end of the day. So great win for Cast, tough loss for Munster, and the tough loss for Munster really is about to have salt poured into the wound, because with that loss to Cast, Munster finishes in the Pool 2 standings in 5th place, which drops Munster down to the Challenge Cup round of 16 now. So as we can see on the standings here, we have Bath and Toulon finishing in the top 2 positions, which gets them both qualified for home games in the round of 16. Cast and Edinburgh also qualify for the Champions Cup. However, they're having away games, and then Gloucester just misses out on points difference and have been officially eliminated from Champions and Challenge Cup competitions. Let's move into Pool 3 now. And here we have Pool 3. So Game 1 for Pool 3 was Stormers versus Leicester, which we have Stormers 39, Leicester 26. Game 2 was between Bayonne and Leinster, in which Bayonne scored 13 and Leinster scored 22. Last but not least, very strong win for the Harlequins here, getting a road win at La Rochelle. So we have La Rochelle versus Harlequins. La Rochelle 17, Harlequins 27. And so the game we're going to deep dive on is actually Game 2, because that was the closest game of the week here in Pool 3. And let's take a peek. So what we'll see throughout the stat line here is Leinster was very much the dominant team offensively. Bayonne had to lean on their defense very heavily to keep this game from getting out of control. So let's look at the top half here. We can see possession plus territory very much in favor of Leinster in the blue ink. And then if we look down at tackles made, Bayonne had to make 171 tackles to just 68 for Leinster. So again, Leinster is the dominant offensive team this particular game, and Bayonne is having to lean on their defensive effort, again, to keep this game from getting too out of hand. And we can also see that with post-contact meters, where Munster gained over twice the amount of meters, post-contact meters, than Bayonne did. So Bayonne had 146 post-contact meters made, and then Leinster over more than doubled that and had 307 meters made after contact. So, as we can see, again, all these offensive stats are favoring Leinster, and just again emphasizing the point of Bayonne having to put in a huge shift defensively. And we can see, even with all of our stats here, Bayonne, strong defensive effort, and Leinster very much the strong team on offense here. So Bayonne, 9 turnovers won to just 5 for Leinster. Again, strong defense for Bayonne there. What really hurt Leinster this particular week, I think, is just the sheer number of turnovers lost. 17 turnovers lost for Leinster this week. That's a lot of handling errors for a team that has the aspirations that Leinster has. So Leinster, as we all can assume, is trying to win another Champions Cup championship. And they got to really get these handling errors taken care of and have a little bit more handling discipline with their games moving forward. Otherwise, it'll be a little tough for them to kind of keep progressing forward against better and better teams in this competition. I will say both teams were very disciplined this game. 8 penalties conceded for Bayonne and only 9 penalties conceded for Leinster, so both teams very, very well disciplined. And then if we look at defenders beating clean breaks, again, this is just to showcase Leinster is the dominant team offensively in this particular game. More defenders beaten, which leads to more clean breaks, which leads to more scoring opportunities. Now let's take a look at Pool 3's standings. So we have Leinster and the Harlequins finishing as the top 2 seeds of the pool. Both qualified for home games. Stormers, Tigers also qualify, or Stormers, Leicester also qualify. They will have road games for their round of 16 game. La Rochelle, with the loss that they had to the Harlequins, has knocked them out from the Champions Cup down to the Challenge Cup, and Bayonne has been eliminated from all competition. Now let's look at Pool 4. So Game 1 was probably the biggest game and the game that had some of the most importance to it. So Game 1 was Po versus Vodacom Bulls. We have Po taking the loss on this particular game, Po 24, Vodacom Bulls 26. Game 2 was Bristol versus Bordeaux. Both of these teams had already qualified, so I didn't happen to watch this game, so I don't know if it was just like second, third string players playing, which I can imagine it was, because again, both teams had already qualified, so not sure their level of care for this particular game. But anyway, we have Bristol-Bordeaux, Bristol 15, Bordeaux 27. Third and final game was between Northampton and the Scarlets. We have Northampton winning by a score of 43-28. And again, Game 1 was the game that had the most importance to it, and that's the game we're looking at here. So, Po versus Bulls. Po was the team who was dominant offensively. Bulls were the strong team defensively. And as we'll see as we're going through this, handling errors and a lack of efficiency for Po is kind of what got them in this particular game. So if we zoom in on the top here, both possession and territory heavily favorited towards Po and the Black Ink. Again, Bulls had to lean on a very strong defensive effort this week to get this victory, and that is definitely seen with the tackles made stat, because rough math, this is like 7 times the amount of tackles that the Bulls had to make in comparison to Po. Po only made 68 tackles, and the Bulls had to make 243. Absolutely huge difference there, but emphasizes the point of Po was the team playing offense more. Bulls had to rely on a very strong defensive effort. And you can also see that with post-contact meters. Po had a lower, actually over twice the amount of post-contact meters than the Bulls did. Po had 350 to just 169 for the Bulls. So huge difference there in offensive stats and defensive stats. Just emphasizing the point, Bulls had to put in a very strong defensive effort to get this win, which was a huge victory for them. Lack of offensive efficiency and a lot of handling errors is what killed Po. Look at turnovers lost. 16 turnovers lost for Poe to 8 for the Bulls. Poe has twice the amount of handling errors than the Bulls does. They're just shooting themselves in the foot. It's making it too difficult for themselves. And then if you look at defenders beaten and how that translates to clean breaks, just very inefficient for Poe. They have 32 defenders beaten, which only led to 3 clean breaks. Bulls had about 1/3 of the amount of defenders beaten, which led to the same number of clean breaks. Just lots of handling errors, quite a bit of inefficiency for Poe. I think Poe will kind of look at this game as this is a game that Poe lost, not necessarily a game that the Bulls won. But anyway, with that being said, that loss for Poe is what caused them to drop down to spot number 5 and be, relegated or demoted to the Challenge Cup round of 16. So, Pool 4 standings finished with Bordeaux and Northampton on top, both getting the home game advantage. Bristol plus Vodacom Bulls are also in the round of 16, but they will be traveling and having away games again. Poe, with that loss to the Bulls, drops them down to the 5th spot in this particular pool, which drops them down to the Challenge Cup, and Scarlets, with the results that have happened, have been officially eliminated from both Champions and Challenge Cup. Let's take a look. This is the final 16 teams in a bracket format. So we've got all of the matchups here, and these particular games will be taking place, or the round of 16 games, I should say, will be taking place between April 3rd and April 5th. So there'll be a lot of good games here. Single elimination tournament now, playing down to one single final champion. So thank you for stopping by, everybody. As always, if you like the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and be ready for the first weekend in April, because I will be going through all of these games as well. And until then, have a great day, and I will see you next time.